All right, hello EM aficionados. So this has been a video that really has been a long time coming. Unfortunately, this has to be done with crappy cell phone video here. Although this is now iPhone 14, so I think the video is going to be a little better than it was before. But I have to prepare some particulate sample grids, so I wanted to document how this works and show you how I prefer to do it. Okay. So let's start by talking about the tools that you will need for this. So you will need a pair of self-locking tweezers, okay? So by self-locking, what this means is that when you're not pressing them, they're clamped together, okay? So when I press them together, they open, okay? So this is the kind you want. You want the ones that clamp together or lock together when you release them, okay? Because you're gonna hold the grid with this. You will need a pipette. This is one with a thin micro tip at the end. I prefer these ones here. I think we got these from Ted Pella, but you can get these from a number of places. But yeah, I like these ones with the skinny tip at the end that we're gonna use to actually put the solution on the grid. You will of course need grids. These are pure carbon lacy or lacy pure carbon support film grids, and the grid itself is made of copper, and I think these are 200 mesh, but there's lots of different grids you can use. That would be a whole discussion in and of itself, how to pick a support film grid. But for today, we're gonna not worry about that, and this is the grids we're using. And then we have, obviously, this is our sample, the particulate. This is carbon black. That's what the customer wants us to look at. You're going to need a vial here. This is a 20 millimeter scintillator vial. I prefer these. These work great for this. You definitely want something that's glass, okay, based on the solvents that we're going to use. You don't want to use anything that's a plastic container here, okay? And then optional stuff. So I have a filter and a sorry, not a filter. I have a syringe. This is a 3 millimeter lure lock tip syringe, and a syringe filter that can also go onto a lure lock tip syringe, okay? This is rated at 1 to 2 micrometers. So what we're going to do actually is, when we prepare the initial solution, we're then going to run it through the filter to remove out like the micro scale chunks, because we only want like the nanoscale chunks left, okay? You're going to need solvents here. So I've got 2 solvents here. I've got deionized water, and this is IPA. So without question, deionized water is my go-to solvent for doing particulate grid prep, okay? The reason for that is that it evaporates the cleanest of all the other solvents, because it's entirely inorganic, right? There's no hydrocarbons in it, nothing carbonaceous at all, okay? So this is gonna leave behind the least amount of crud when it evaporates. If you can't use deionized water for some reason, then methanol and IPA are your next best options, because those are fairly volatile and they do evaporate away fairly cleanly, although not as clean as deionized water. The reason I have the IPA here is because I actually know with these carbon blacks is that they don't dissolve very well in just pure DI. What I found was that if I add a little bit of IPA to the deionized water, they actually disperse a lot better. So that's why I have the IPA in here, okay? Again, you could also use methanol as well. I don't recommend you use anything that's non-polar, like hexane or something like that. Those tend to leave behind a lot of crud. So you want to use something that's like alcohol based when you're doing this. At least, that's preferred, okay? So methanol will work, IPA will work. Again, deionized water is my preferred one. Although deionized water alone, it does evaporate a little bit more slowly than IPA or methanol. but that's where we have another optional piece of equipment. So come over here, we have an oven here. So this oven has already been heating up, and you can see here the internal temperature is about at the boiling point of water, which is intentional, right? So I have it set there to help evaporate the water. So once we prep the grid and it's in the tweezers, we're actually going to put it into the oven here for a few minutes to help evaporate the water away. And that tends to, it will help make it a little faster, but it also tends to leave behind less residue that way. This is not going to hurt your grids at all, okay? Let me state that clearly, right? Your grid material is made of copper. Copper boils at, not boils, melts. It's like, I don't know what the number is, how many thousands of degrees Celsius. So the 100 degrees Celsius is not going to do anything to the grid material. The carbonaceous film itself is not going to be affected either, okay? Not at a temperature this low. So don't worry about that being an issue, okay? Other stuff here. We have an ultrasonicator as well. I recommend, if you have access to one of these, obviously use it. This will help to disperse your particles. We're going to have to actually put a little more water in the basin here, because this is going to go in here, and we want that about at the midpoint of the vial here. So actually, if I pull this over here really quick. So we have a hookup here for DI-H2O, and so I'm just going to go ahead and add this in. It does have a recommended fill level. That's about the recommended fill level. So you can actually see this if we, you can see back there, operated fill level. We're basically right there. So anyways, if you have one of these basins, make sure that it's flat. You don't want something like, oops, you don't want something like that, okay? Then it's higher on this side than this side. So you want to make sure this is flat. You also want to make sure that you're putting it on a flat surface. So, and like right here, okay? All right, and so fortunately I got that a little bit wet, so here, I'm gonna go ahead and just dry this off with a paper towel really quick. Okay, so another thing, I already did this, so I'm not gonna show it, but if you have access to dry nitrogen, so we have a nitrogen gun here. So I actually use this to dust out the inside of my scintillator vial here before we put anything in it. So, okay, so at this point, we are ready to start the prep. So I'm gonna take off the lid, set it down there, set down my vial, and then I'm going to open up my container here. Believe me, this is tough to do with one hand. Okay, there we go. Okay, and now you really don't need much stuff here to do this, okay? I'm just going to tap this until I get, like these come out in kind of granules. I'm just going to tap this until I get a little bit of material in here. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, so really, I could do one more. Yeah, like that's gonna be plenty, okay? And again, we're gonna filter this as well, so go ahead and cap this. Do it with one hand. Okay, now from here, we're gonna fill this up with deionized H2O. I'm gonna fill it about to the midpoint. Oops, sorry, I accidentally stopped the last video, so. Okay. Gonna fill this about to the midpoint. Okay. And then you can see, right, these are not really dispersing well. So this is where I found that with this sample, I have to put in a little squirt of IPA. And then we're going to cover the grid, or the vial. Okay. And now we can ultrasonicate it. So we're going to put it in here. All right, so I'm doing voiceover here while we got the sonicator on, because otherwise the audio is just cringe-worthy. So anyways, so we're sonicating here. Periodically, you can check the solution, make sure that everything's dispersing well. If you see the vial drifting around, you can reposition it. And periodically check it, make sure everything's breaking up okay. Be doing this a few more times, because there's a few more times where the sonicator is just, it's too loud and it just makes the audio terrible. So all right, so what are we doing after this? Checking the solution again. I think what I end up doing is I end up concentrating this more, because it's just very dilute even at this point. And I also, I showed you the syringe filter, so we're going to use that later on a more concentrated version of the solution. Doing that, we can grab the grid here. So again, this is tough to do with one hand. Okay, so you want to make sure when you grab the grid that you're grabbing it just by the edge. And I don't know how well you can see this. This is going to be kind of tricky to do, but I'll try. Okay, just like that. So I barely got it by the edge. In fact, ideally I would have liked to grab it a little bit more than that, but that's fine. Okay, and you notice this is the dark, shiny side of the grid. This is the side with the film. That's the side you want to put the particles on. If you look at the other side, that's the coppery side. This is the side without the film. So you want this side up, and that's what's going to take the solution. Okay. If you're going to do this with multiple tweezers at once, make sure you're keeping track of what's what. I have like a label on this one, so I know what's what here. All right, back to the sonicator. Going to check this one more time here. I pulled the grid out, and at this point, after we pull this out, we're ready to put a drop of the solution on the grid. All right, so let this go a little bit more. Again, there's no hard fast rule for this. You just optically just verify that it looks, well dispersed, and you're good to go. All right, so let's see what we're doing now. It's here to dry off the water. Okay, and so now we need to run it through the syringe filter. So we need another vial here to take the filtered solution. So I have a few of these vials already prepared. Actually, let me go ahead. I'm going to dust this off here so you can see how this works. I don't know how well this will be, how well you'll be able to see this, but we'll try. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too loud. Okay, so now at this point, we need to draw up the solution with the syringe and then run it through the filter. Let me see if I can't prop up this phone so we can actually watch it this way. That's not too bad right there. Okay, so let's see if we can get this to work. Opening the syringe packet. Okay. Opening the vial. Let me get this out of the way. Okay, now this is 3 milliliters, 3 ml syringe. This is about 10 ml solution, so we're gonna have to do this a few times, obviously. So draw it up. Okay, and then run it through your filter. Now, if this is working properly, I don't know how well you can see that. You should see like a color change in the filter, which we do. Okay, so that's a good sign. That means that it's filtering. Again, this is filtering out the micro scale stuff. That does not necessarily mean that when we actually look at the grid that we may not have clumping on the micro scale, right? Because, you know, when the solution's drying and everything, I mean, that's a very dynamic process. So, you know, we may end up we may still end up seeing some large clumps just by virtue of that. Yeah, but you can see this very clearly. There's the syringe filter, right? That's pretty dark. So yes, so it filtered all that out. So here's our filtered solution right here. So just looking at it, I don't know. Now, one thing we could try doing, and I may do this, is because we have the filter here, we could have really like loaded up the solution here in terms of the concentration. This may or may not be high enough. I don't know. Like, just let me pick the phone back up here. Yeah, just visually looking at it, you know, it looks like there is a tinge to it. It may not be very easy to see, you know, on the cell phone video, but to me it looks like there's a little bit of a tinge, so we're probably okay. But yeah, I mean, you could, right, you can see how much that's filtering out, so you could have really loaded up this solution quite a bit and then run it through the filter. So again, we won't really know until we do the TEM, but we'll assume that this is good. Okay, again, this is just, you know, demonstrated purposes. So now we're ready for the final phase here. Well, shouldn't say final, but we're getting there. Okay, so now we take our pipette, draw up the solution, okay, and then we're going to place 1 drop on the grid. Okay, just like that. As always, you know, don't reuse pipettes with different solutions. Don't reuse filters and syringes with different solutions, okay? If you wash out the vial good, you could reuse it with a different solution, but the filters and the syringes and the pipettes, those should be disposed, okay? All right, so now we can take this and put it into our oven. So I have another, should have got this out. I have another pair of tweezers here that I'm going to use to pick this up and put it in the oven. Let me go ahead here, open this. Okay, now I'm going to grab this here. And we're gonna put this just like that, okay? And so we'll check this in a few minutes. We wanna make sure all the solvent is evaporated, and then we'll be good to go. All right, so we'll check back in a few minutes. Okay, so what I did here was, I didn't show this, but I went and I really concentrated the solution, so it's basically opaque. You can't even see through it now optically, okay? The final result, once we filter it, is going to look much better than this, but I was concerned that the filtered solution that we were getting before just wasn't concentrated enough. So it looked like it was just, normal water. So I really overloaded this. Again, once we run it through the filter, it's, going to come out much nicer looking. But anyways, really overloaded here. What I'm going to actually show you next is that we need a heat sink for putting the tweezers with the grid once we take that out of the oven. So that's the next thing we're going to do. And again, I'm just periodically checking this visually to make sure everything's kind of breaking up well. But we're going to go to talking about the heatsink here. Like a heat sink, okay, so this is metal right here. So you want something like this to help it dissipate the heat. We could also use, this on the fume hood as well, but just a big solid chunk of metal. Let me grab another syringe filter here. At some point, these will get clogged and they won't pass anything, so. All right, so we're going to turn off the sonicator and we're going to filter our new super concentrated solution here. All right, let's take a look and see how our previous grid is doing. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see that, but yeah, the solvent's completely gone and it's evaporated. It doesn't look wet at all, so this is ready to come out. Okay, so now don't grab this with your hands. You need something to grab it with, so I have it like a blunt pair of tweezers. Okay, and then I'm just gonna set this over here. Okay, to let that cool off. All right, so let me set this back up here and we'll see if we can't filter this a little bit better. Okay. So, well, not filter better, but just get more concentration in the solution, the filtered solution. Yeah, you can see how good of a job it's doing, right? So it's definitely filtering. Okay. And again, when the particles get to be certain size, it's possible that you may not see the presence of them directly in the solution. There's a lot of variables that go into that. But now this has been concentrated just to a far greater degree. Okay, so now, so now if we look at this, get the phone up here. Yeah, so I can definitely see some color in this now, which I wasn't seeing before. So this is probably, going to produce a better result. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another drop of this onto the grid, okay? Which is fine, right? Same solution, so I'm just going to go ahead and put another drop, but I can very clearly see a little tinge in there, so this is, you know, more promising, okay? So let me go grab, this should be cool now, or cool enough to handle. Okay. All right, let's see if we can do this here. See if I can't get a, here we go, continuous. Okay, there we go. Come on. Okay, there we go. All right, and then let me open up the oven again. And back in we go. Okay, we'll see it again in a few minutes. All right, so what you should always do with these, you know, unless you're not planning to keep it, is you always want to carefully label your solutions here. So I have labels on the lid and on the bottom, and on the actual glass part as well, with the date, what the sample is, and what the solvent is, and the concentration. Now what I should also put on this is that these were 1 to 2 micron filtered as well, so that is in there. So I will add that in as well, but we should be good to go now to, okay, yeah, this is ready. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So from there, it's just a matter of, you know, once the grid cools down, put it in your grid box. I have a separate grid box for prepared grids that I use, and right, I only keep like the fresh grids in this, so I don't get things mixed up. But from there, that's it basically. So that's hopefully some insight into how I prepare particulate samples, some, you know, tips and tricks maybe you can use yourselves, and hope you found that useful. So thanks again for your support. All right, false alarm. There's one other thing I wanted to state here. Okay, so before you use these tweezers again to make another grid, you want to wash the ends of them, okay, so you don't get any kind of cross-contamination of other samples, okay? So use some filter paper and some IPA and some DI, you know, scrub it good with the filter paper, rinse them with the DI, then blow them off with the dry nitrogen, and then you should be good to go, okay? But I wouldn't just go use your tweezers again as is like this, unless for some reason you were preparing a grid of the exact same solution. But I wouldn't do this with a different sample, because you probably run the risk of cross-contaminating. So anyways, last little PSA I wanted to put in there, and now we're done. So, all right, thank you.